Hello, good morning. My name's Fraser Kennedy, and I'm here today to present an UMi Makes It Easy workshop to embed equality, diversity, and inclusion in the workplace. I work for Croner, and we've been partnered with UMi for a good while now. My role at Croner is to advise you guys in terms of your access to employment law, health and safety, and commercial legal. And I also look after the team of lovely ladies that are waiting on the other end of the phone to take your calls. My background is in employment law, so I've level 7 CIPD, and I've got a good couple of years now experience of advising clients of all different sizes through difficult employment law issues. Okay. So just to clarify, what we're going to cover today does pertain to Great Britain and Northern Ireland only. If you are in the other jurisdictions kind of listed there on the bottom half of the screen, that's not necessarily an issue. We can still support you if you want to give us a call. But just to be quite clear, the content in this session today will be pertaining just to Great Britain and Northern Ireland. As I mentioned before, I look after our partnerships team that look after UMi members for any kind of HR, health and safety or commercial legal issue. There's a telephone number on your screen there. No matter if the question is relating to today's session or anything in the domain of health and safety or HR, feel free to give us a call. We're 24/7, 365. There's always someone there to answer your questions or help you with any kind of query or process. All you need to do is quote that account number on the bottom there, CGL 28333, and the lovely ladies on hand will help you with whatever your query might be. So, what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about EDI, we're going to talk about the importance of it, we're going to talk about why it's relevant to you as an employer, what does it mean that you've got to do. We're going to talk about discrimination and how that actually looks in the workplace and how that influences what we do next and the processes that sit alongside it. We're going to look at strategies for EDI to help you manage any kind of queries that you might face. And then we're also going to give you some tools to help evaluate yourself and benchmark where you are in terms of EDI. So what does EDI basically mean? It stands for, it's an acronym for equality, diversity, and inclusivity. Okay, now, as many of you will know, this is a growing topic month on month, quarter on quarter, year on year. It's something that in my line of work, in terms of consulting HR, it's becoming more and more common. People have got questions about it, queries about it, and unfortunately, claims around that area as well. Now, generally, the focus is making sure that we're an open employer, inclusive employer, and making sure that we're upholding all the obligations that we need to make sure everyone is as comfortable, has the ability to perform to their best in the workplace that's within our control. Okay. Why is it important? Now, diversity, again, the world is becoming a more and more diverse place as we move into remote working, as traveling and working abroad is more and more common. It's becoming a much more affluent thing across all different industries. Where we have companies that have good kind of EDI, good ability to adapt and good policies and processes to sit alongside that, we usually see a better performance rate, a better churn rate, so less people coming and going. Obviously, on point 3 is the nitty gritty of why we're talking about EDI today, and where we see businesses with strong EDI processes and policies, they tend to avoid discrimination in its first instance, but also the legal pressures that potentially can come after it. Having good EDI, again, is reflective of a good employee well-being, of people understanding what their rights are, what questions they can ask, what they can say, what they can't say. And the bottom one is probably one that we see quite a lot of damage being inflicted on especially small businesses online, is reputation. Where we see these issues in mainstream media, so on BBC News, where you see claims of people winning a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of pounds, it's always around discrimination. Okay, and I'll go into a little bit more detail why that is, in a couple of moments' time. But not only from a media perspective, but we all know about Glassdoor. We all know that employees can go online and share their opinions on a business, and people often will go on there to look at how people are assessing businesses before they join, before they apply for a job. So it's massively important that we don't have anything on those websites or in the media that's going to tarnish any kind of reputation that we might have already worked really hard to build on. So when we talk about equality, the first thing to understand is what protected characteristics are. Now, protected characteristics are outlined in what's known as the Equality Act 2010. Okay, now this was an area of law that was developed from an old piece of European law, but effectively what it does is it affords anyone who falls into any of the 9 categories on your screen protection from detriment in any capacity. Okay, so we can go through them one by one to give you a bit of meat on the bones of what I mean by that. So age is one protected characteristic. Now, that might mean that you can't be treated less favorably for being particularly older or even particularly younger or any distinct age. Disability is probably one of the most common kind of protected characteristics that we see being asserted by employees in the UK. Now, disability, again, we'll all be familiar with what this means, but how it's defined in the Equality Act is a physical or mental impairment that affects you on a daily basis for around 12 months or more. Now, if an employee meets that definition, it's very, very likely that they're going to be protected by that characteristic. Gender reassignment, again, as we start to learn more about how humans are, this is one that's becoming more and more kind of frequent in mainstream HR and in the media as well. Marriage and civil partnership is probably the odd one out of this bunch where we really don't see many kind of issues with kind of discrimination on this topic, but it's still obviously very, very important to be aware that people can be put or treated differently because of their status of marriage or civil partnerships. Pregnancy and maternity, again, quite simple in terms of being put at a detriment for being pregnant or getting pregnant or taking your maternity leave. Race, again, fairly obvious one, being treated at a detriment because of your race. Religion or belief is one that we're seeing a lot of. It's a bit of a tumultuous area in terms of the landscape of the law at the minute because of that second word, belief. What is a belief? It could be absolutely anything. And that's what we're starting to see with judges and how they're deciding who gets the protection and who doesn't at the moment. Sex, in terms of that, in terms of gender, which is maybe not the right kind of way to describe it anymore, but their scientific sex, you can be discriminated on those grounds, and also sexual orientation. So to summarize what these mean, these are reasons that people can be treated differently. And in order to raise a discrimination claim, what one would need to do is show that one of these 9 reasons on the screen was one of the contributors to why they were treated differently or put at a detriment. You'll know that everyone that's watching this call will fit into more than one of these categories. So everybody can be discriminated against in a certain capacity. Obviously, the context is heavily important when determining that factor. So that's all great that we understand a little bit more now about how people can be discriminated against, but what does that actually mean for you guys as employers? An area that we're seeing a lot of traction in and a lot of questions from our clients is about gender pay gap reporting. Okay, now this obviously pertains back to the previous slide in terms of sex, in terms of who's being treated differently because of their sex, in terms of what money they're being paid. It's obviously quite an on-the-nose discrimination element when you think about it. If I'm a certain sex, I'm getting paid less. Is that the deciding factor on why I'm being paid less? That's what will be tested. But effectively, what it is a simple report on and a simple analysis, really, on what the pay gap is between 2 genders. Now, the first point there is the most important prerequisite when we're considering this is that equal work is the job the same. We're not going to be comparing a CEO to a 0 hours or a temporary worker. Those terms and conditions obviously are going to be more likely to be very, very different. Where you'll see the best kind of opportunities to report this will be in teams, where you have a team of people, might even only be 2 people, but that do very, very similar work. They might serve the same client base. They might have the same day-to-day. They might share a rota. They might cover each other when they're on holiday. That's when we can start to see that equal work box starting to be ticked. Now, ideally, where we want to be with this is equality. So ideally, what we want is no chasm, no gap between anybody because of gender in that role. Now, what you might be asking is, well, yeah, we do have people that get paid differently that do similar jobs, but it's not because of their gender, which is fine, absolutely fine. But what I would really strongly recommend that we have, if that's the case, is a nice robust policy to explain that. Now, what I mean by that is, and to give you a bit of context on that, might be you might have someone that gets paid more because they've been with you for longer. You might have a long-term benefit, in terms of increase in pay. You might have different pays because people perform better, KPIs and targets. Those things are absolutely fine. And if it's something that you operate, I'd strongly recommend getting it down into a policy, because what that does is it demonstrates that it's not the gender that is the deciding factor on why these people are paid differently. So if that's something that you do and you've not got in place, I'd have a think about how we can do that. And obviously we can support you with that if that's something you're not sure on how to demonstrate, your reasoning for paying people differently. Now, if you're a bigger business with over 250 employees, you're legally obliged to publish this document and your analysis, okay, which is an undeniable obligation. We can't dodge it. And the issue that you might face with that, if there is a big, kind of a pay gap, is that it is published publicly. People can access it, people can see it, people can request to see it, which again, from a reputation perspective, might cause a few issues. It might, we might get asked a few questions. It might be quite difficult to answer. So if that's something that you've identified as an issue, and maybe you're struggling to find why, who, what, where, and why that gap is there might be a genuine reason for it, like I said before. But it's about making sure we can demonstrate what that reason is. Okay, the way the reports are set up, it's not always apparently clear why the gap is bigger, but there are sometimes genuine reasons for it that don't inference on gender. And in terms of what it applies to, it's all take-home pay and benefits. Okay, so there's contractual bonuses, if there's even contractual benefits in respect to extra time off or something like that, those are things that should be considered as part of this process as well. Again, if you want support or you're not sure what needs to be included and what doesn't, give us a ring and we're more than happy to talk you through it. So, discrimination, big heavy word that we see quite a lot in modern media now, but what we're going to talk about it is quite strictly in the domain of employment law and how that works from a HR capacity. So to put it really, really simply, it's where an employer or an employee treats someone differently or less favorably, again, because of one of those 9 protected characteristics we talked about before, okay? Now, it's really, really important to notice that word candidate in the brackets there, because it's important to identify that this applies to everybody that works for you under any capacity, or even people that come and interview with you. It still covers those people, okay? So we're going to talk about recruitment shortly, but it covers everyone in your domain, whether they are employees, whether they're workers, they're part-time, term time, 0 hours, self-employed, contractors, doesn't matter. This area of law covers everyone. And that's what makes this area of employment law unique, because usually employment law only covers employees, whereas this area of law covers absolutely everybody, okay? Bullet point 3 is another one that I think some people are not really aware of, is that it doesn't have to be intentional. The laws and I guess you could say the sanctions and punishments in this area are severe, and the judges often like to make examples of people in this domain. So it's one that needs to be treated with obviously great respect, and to make sure we don't fall on the wrong side of it, even if it's unintentional. But you might be thinking, oh gosh, that sounds scary, but there's ways we can manage it. There's ways that we can identify it. And if we do, there's ways of managing it and dealing with it. But it's about making sure that you understand that even if it's something we weren't aware of or we didn't intend to do, it can still be something that we have to answer for. Again, what we're going to talk about again is those measures to try and help manage any discrimination or harassment in the workplace. So when we talk about discrimination, we usually kind of categorize them into 3 things. Okay, so direct discrimination are obvious ones where you could say there was probably most likely an intention to discriminate, which is obviously quite, I'm glad to say quite rare. It doesn't happen that often or that frequently in the UK. Unfortunately, it does, but I suppose that's why these laws exist, to punish those that do that. But these are the ones that you'll mainly see in mainstream media. The ones that get the big payouts are the ones where people have gone out of their way to discriminate against people and put people at a detriment for whatever reason. These are the ones that are usually make the media, because I know that there's one in a big banking company late last year, which was in the 6-figure bracket of payout. So really, really significant and damaging. Indirect discrimination is where we see a lot of people initially fall foul of it or get kind of ask the question that we can't answer about it, where we're not necessarily trying to do something, but as part of trying to get to a certain goal or a certain criteria or whatever it might be, we've tripped over a bit of a discrimination element in error. I'll talk through some examples to put a bit more meat on the bones on that shortly. And then finally, the unconscious bias is one that usually is one that is easily remedied. It's usually one that's either it's been a long-term practice that's, that we've never had an issue with, and suddenly because someone said a certain thing or someone new's joined the business has suddenly become something that obviously isn't appropriate anymore for whatever reason. But they're the ones that are usually very, very easy to work out and very easy to kind of to change the process or the policy or whatever it might be. I'm not sure. But what we'll do is we'll talk through some specific examples in a moment. But to further break it down, there's other elements of discrimination in the workplace that I guess you could say might help you understand that it's not always strictly in the employer's control. Okay, so harassment usually occurs between two employees, which is still an employer's responsibility to untie, to flatten out, to deal with. Now, it has to pertain to offensive behaviour that is related to a protected characteristic. So usually see harassment paired with the word bullying. Normally you see those two words in tandem together. And it's usually, again, from my experience, between two employees that this happens. It's not always, but usually that's the case. It's important that we understand that we have a responsibility in that. And the measures that we're going to talk about a little bit, a couple of moments' time, will help you understand how we can manage those things. Victimization. It's a word that is usually misplaced a lot in terms of how it's applied. But in this specific discipline of employment law, it's negative treatment because of an involvement of a discrimination or a harassment complaint. So an example of that might be that if I think I've been discriminated against because I'm a man, that might be true, it might be not true. But if I was then to be put at a detriment because I asked that question and made that allegation, that's what victimization is. It's not anything to do with I suppose being a victim of that. It's more about me asserting that statutory right not to be discriminated against and then being treated poorly because I put my hand up and said I'm not happy with this. Microaggressions are something that's not written into the law per se, but it's something that usually a bit of a straw that broke the camel's back scenario, if you like, can contribute to both of the two bullet points above, depending on what the context of the situation is. So that's a very, very wordy slide, and I'm not going to talk you all through it. I'd love to talk you all through it, but I don't have the time today. But you can obviously take your time to have a look through it and see what you think. Okay. So on the left, we've got direct. So again, like I said before, that's where we are, you could say, intentionally, potentially, or using a specific, protected characteristic to deny someone something or put them at a detriment. And indirect is something where we're trying to achieve something, maybe commercially or whatever it might be, but we've tripped over a bit of an issue. So we'll pick an example or two and go through them. Okay, so capping an employee's wages and blocking promotions because of their age, regardless of skills and performance. Okay, again, fairly obvious and on the nose, that one. You might have someone who is in the business that's doing really, really well, but they are very, very young. Maybe they're outperforming some of their colleagues that are a bit more tenured than they are. And you are maybe hesitant to reward them or hesitant to promote them because you don't want to upset everybody else. You might think it might upset the apple cart. That could be a form of discrimination, theoretically. If the only reason you can identify for not giving them that benefit of pay, of promotion or whatever it might be, is because, well, it's because they're younger and I don't think that's, maybe they're not quite ready for it. That is a form of discrimination. That is not the most common one, but it's something that we are seeing every now and then. It's something that we need to be mindful of. Jump down to point 3 here. Ask an employee not to disclose their colleagues that they are gay. Now, what we're seeing here is definitely, well, depending on who the context and who's in the situation, detriment of some description. But it is just a differentiation of treatment because in that example, you might not say that to someone who is of a different sexual orientation. So it doesn't always necessarily have to be a detriment. It can just be different treatment. Okay. Now, where I would get concerned about a situation like that is we are going to struggle to justify that. There's no justification out there for that whatsoever that I can come up with that would be logical in my mind. And not to say that we can discriminate if we can justify it, But ultimately, what we want to do if we have to defend an allegation or a claim like that is try and nudge it into this category on the right-hand side here and say, well, there is a reason for that. Let me talk you through why that might be. Some of the examples on the left-hand side here, as you can see, by the word direct, we're going to struggle to do that. Okay. Indirect discrimination. Let's have a look at an example here. So, an employee returns from maternity and an employer refuses a private space to breastfeed or express. Okay. Now, this is quite a tumultuous topic at the moment, as obviously we know out there, generally speaking anyway, that GPs, kind of the midwives, the health experts in this area would recommend that practice. It's something that they would be encouraged normally to do. An employer theoretically should be open in allowing, any practice that's going to enhance welfare for mother and child. Now, what it might be is the office is being renovated. There's no safe place that we can give you to do that. Now, what you're doing there is, you could argue we're actually protecting your welfare, because there's nowhere safe that you can be on your own that you can do that, because it's maybe a bit of a construction site at the minute. But ultimately, what we've done there, theoretically, is potentially discriminated against that person. It wasn't our intention. And, when I talk to clients about cases like this, they're mortified. They think, oh, I would never, ever, ever do that. I would never even dream of doing that. And I can't believe that, that's something that's someone could think that. But ultimately, what we've got to be careful of here is making sure that our goals, our the targets we've got as a company or whatever is going on in the business is malleable, is adaptable to whatever this practice is. And one that we see all the time, and it's not on the screen here, but I'm going to share it because it's probably one of the better ones to kind of help you understand, is where we see job adverts or where we see contracts of employment that talk about the dress code at work. And one of them might be, I've seen it quite a couple of times, is where they say no headwear. It's a professional office, no headwear. Now, what we think about there is to say, right, it's a professional office. We might have clients coming and going. We don't want people to be wearing baseball caps or something like that. We want to give off the image that we are a professional outfit. That's a pretty logical, justifiable kind of policy. On the outset, when you're looking at it from the top down, makes sense. Like, I suppose that if I went into a business that I was potentially going to buy from, and there's people walking around with baseball caps, I'd be thinking, do these guys know what they're doing? But what we see sometimes is people that have that practice a certain faith are required to wear headwear of some description, where theoretically that policy is stopping them from following that faith or practicing that faith. It was never our intention to do that whatsoever. Our intention was to be a professional outfit. But ultimately, what we've done is ask someone who practices a certain religion or faith to not practice it anymore, which is obviously not acceptable. It's potentially a form of discrimination. So what I would encourage on your side of things would be, we know that direct discrimination is not going to be a common thing, and I hope that's not going to be a common thing. If you're worried about that side of it, or you're worried that, from something that you've read today or heard me say today, that you might think, oh, actually, that there might be something I need to talk about, just give us a call. We can help you flatten it out. We're there to support you. If there's something where you think you might be putting a bit of a toe over the line, intentionally or unintentionally, about what we're talking about today, we can help you solve it. We can help you take the heat off it. We can help you fix it. So I don't want this to be a scaremongering situation or anything like that. All of these things can be fixed. It's just about making sure we do it in the right way with the right processes. So, strategies. Now, recruitment, again, is something that I talked about earlier, and it's something that, from a claim perspective, to be really honest with you, a claim perspective, we're seeing more and more people claim against employers that they don't work for. And that's usually because they've gone through an interview process and they've been unsuccessful for whatever reason. And they've attributed the reason for them not being successful to one of the 9 protected characteristics that we talked about at the start. Now, first point, and it's the most difficult one usually when I'm speaking to clients, is recognizing the unconscious bias. The clue's in the word in the middle. It's unconscious. You're not doing it on purpose. You may not even know that you're doing it. But that's one of the things that we, being external to you, are really good at picking out, because we speak to a range of different businesses, different industries, and we're not in specifically speaking, in your bubble, if that makes sense. So it's easier for us to say that's maybe a good thing. Maybe that's maybe something we might want to reconsider. The job spec is something that we see people fall and trip over all the time. And usually what employers do that fall foul of this is they put things in there that could pertain to one of those 9 protected characteristics. So one of the most recent ones I saw was for a tree surgery company. And one of the requirements for the job role was it was a tree surgeon role. And one of the bullet points was able-bodied. That was something that they genuinely put on the job spec, which, again, thinking from a really honest perspective, I can understand why they might have put that, because you'd have to go up and down trees, you've got to operate chainsaws, all that kind of stuff that's probably very, very dangerous. But what we've actually done there is say, if you're disabled, we're not going to give you this job. We don't, doesn't matter. We're not going to look at reasonable adjustments. We're just going to say, look, if you're not able-bodied, you don't get it. That is discrimination. Okay. Now, while you might argue and say, well, how can a disabled person do tree surgery? You've got to keep in mind that someone who's disabled under the Equality Act could be for any illness, physical or mental. That covers all of those situations. And what employers should be doing and should be considering are what known as reasonable adjustments. So adaptations to the role to allow people that may have certain disabilities to perform in that role to the best of their ability. Now, the reason that fell foul is because it was a straight no. It was a, we're not going to talk to you, or we're not interested in you, which isn't the right approach to take. That moves nicely onto the positive action there. If it's a case where there's someone with a certain characteristic and there's adaptations to be made, what can we do? How can we push that out of the way? How can we look at solutions and circumnavigate any kind of situations? Which, again, if you're asking yourself that question, please just give us a call. As you can imagine, it's highly contextual. Advertising the role, again, try and advertise it in as many places as you can, as wide-ranging outlets as you can. Shortlisting for an interview, again, as something that can be a good or a bad practice depending on what the shortlists are for, but it's something that would be advantageous to make sure you're getting the best talent, of course. Assessment of the candidates, how are we measuring people? How are we making sure that we're, I guess you could say, assessing the right criteria for this role? How are we going to make sure we're going to assess people that isn't going to put people at a certain disadvantage? And obviously appointing the right person at the end once we've gone through points 1 through 6, ideally nice and cleanly without any difficult questions. A policy. Now, a policy is demonstration of your awareness. It's demonstration of your processes, your commitment, your ability to identify what could be a problem. Okay, it's proactivity that is the name of the game with an EDI policy. Now, as you can see in the bottom right here, there's actually a QR code that you can scan to get a free template as a member of UMi. So I encourage you, if you've not got one, or if you've already got one, to compare it with this one, to have a look if you've got everything, from a compliancy perspective. But if you've not got one, I would strongly recommend getting one in place. Like I say, where we see issues with EDI, and especially when they start to get to a litigious standard, is where employees say, well, my employer doesn't even have a policy. They don't even understand EDI. They don't even know, I don't even know how to engage with my employer on this topic, because it seems like they're not even aware of it. That might not be the case. You might be the EDI, kind of master. You might know absolutely everything about it. But if you've not got a policy on it, the audit trail suggests that you're not. It's something that it's an absolute 101, if you like. It's the first building block in making sure we've got this area covered. It also outlines that if people have got questions about it, or if they think they're being discriminated against, how to deal with that. Okay, it encourages people not to harbour these complaints, to talk about them, to be open about them, which is what we want. Okay, we don't want things to explode in an emotional mess, 3 months after something's happened. If there's been a passing comment or something that someone's not happy with and they think it does pertain to a protected characteristic, we as employers need to answer that and flatten that out as quickly and as efficiently as possible, and ideally back that up potentially maybe with a grievance process, but it depends on the specific nature of the complaint, of course. If you have people in your business that are asking questions about this, or are making kind of noises about this or grumbling about this, give us a ring, because this is a high risk topic if it's not dealt with quickly. So I just implore you just to get a little bit of support, even if you're happy that you think you've got it under control. we'd be more than happy just to give you just a bit of external second opinion, just to make sure you're being nudged in the right direction with it. But scan the code, have a look at it. If you've got questions about it, obviously give us a call. Or if you think that it's filling some gaps that yours maybe didn't have before, then again, we'd be delighted to hear about that, or what your general thoughts are on it. Training. Now, training pertains back to policy. Essentially, what you want the training to be is a real thorough, granular look through of what the policy is, what it pertains to, who it affects, who it covers, what it means. Now, normally where I see this applied most effectively is with managers. So it's people that have got kind of a managerial responsibilities of some description. Now, an EDI policy will be fine to send out to all staff. I don't think there's, and if we want to be kind of working to minimums, I don't think you need to do anything more than that. It's good to train everybody, of course, but I think if we're thinking, right, let's take a tactical approach to this, I'd look at definitely training any kind of managers that have a reporting line into them on this to make sure they understand. Again, where we see things that go a little bit off-piste is where the manager doesn't have a policy to refer back to and then tries to handle it on their own, tries to handle these complaints without the kind of support of a process. That's where things can maybe, and sometimes unfortunately, go a little bit off-piste, but it's good practice to do it. I'd say maybe even look at doing it twice a year, again, because of religious holidays, because of themes in certain months and weeks. I mean, even last week it was a mental health awareness week, which we see a lot of people suffering from disabilities around mental health. Obviously, there's a lot more awareness about that today, and clinical support for people that are going through that, which is fantastic. But it also means that the pressures that come with that are often bleed into employment. So it's important that everybody's aware of what's going on in the wider world, and especially if you're a manager, what your obligations, responsibilities are to your staff. We actually can provide training on this topic if it's something that you're not sure about. Again, give us a call. We can have a chat to you about how that works and how we can basically get your managers the best information to make sure that they're aware of all the elements that come with EDI. Like I've just touched on there, there's 24/7 is health and safety and legal support as well. So not just HR, we do have a commercial legal team as well. We have, as an UMi member, if you wanted to, us to support you with a bit more of a hands-on approach with your documentation, your policy, your letter drafting, your processes, your training, like I've just touched on, you guys are entitled to discount because you're an UMi member. But at the very, very least, you've got the baseline entitlement of a free advice line. I just encourage you to use it, to just answer those questions, to get support with the policy or whatever it might be. Certainly, if there's anything in this session today that you think, I just want to know more about that, or just go through it in a bit more detail, by all means, all of my team have seen this session and deal with discrimination cases on a daily basis, so that they'll all be in a good place to support you with any kind of queries. Just a summary, just to kind of round things off for you, is that promoting it, demonstrating it is an absolutely key weapon in your arsenal to be a successful business in terms of churn, reputation, legal risks as well. It's something that it's probably had the most traction and the highest increase from a legal perspective in the past 4 or 5 years of any claim. So it's something that we need to be promoting it, demonstrating. We know about it. We know what to do. If you've got questions, come and talk to us, and we can obviously, kind of help you manage that situation. Obviously, prevent discrimination, and talking about it to your staff and having training on it. Obviously, is all kind of important elements to make sure that we're doing our bit, as it were. There's the phone number again, just in case you need it or you missed it. It'd be lovely to hear from you what you think of this presentation, or even if you've got any questions about it. Again, it's a free advice line. Would encourage you to come and speak to us. But that's all for today. Thank you for listening, and have a good day. Thank you very much.